Good afternoon, Astrid.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Welcome to the channel. Um, it's great to have you here. So, to introduce you, Astrid Korin is an executive coach who helps busy leaders to thrive in work and life by cultivating resilience and presence from the inside out. Astrid has over 20 years of experience as a coach, team coach, trainer, and facilitator with senior leaders from all around the world, and describes becoming a coach as one of the most natural career moves she's ever made. Astrid recently delivered the 3 fabulous sessions for the Animas Coaching Leaders in Times of Crisis course on topics such as self awareness, emotional intelligence, and building resilience, both from the perspective of the coach and the client. I thoroughly enjoyed Astrid's 3 sessions and couldn't wait to have her on the channel. So it's great to have you here, Astrid. And I'd like to start by asking you if you can tell us a little more about the work that you do now as a transformative executive coach.
Thanks, David. It's always slightly uncomfortable for me to hear someone give the kind of the summary of who I am and what they see when they look at my website and my credentials. Um, but thank you. Thanks for articulating that. It is lovely to hear. So you would like to know a little bit more about the kind of work that I do and what brought me here. So I am an executive coach. I work with clients one-to-one. I work with teams, senior executive teams, and I deliver my own leadership development program called Inside Out, which is a labor of love that I developed with a partner of mine, Maggie Farah. And as co-founders, we pulled this program together and we've been delivering it now for about 2.5 years to over 200 leaders. And it's working really well. It's having the impact that we were hoping for and more. So that's a big part of what I do as well.
Thanks, Corinne. And what led you to pulling where did you start with pulling a program together like that?
Mm. Well, actually, it started with the relationship, which is really important to me. And it is also how I like to run my business through relationships and my network. And we can come on to that when we talk about, building a business and scaling and that sort of thing a bit later in the conversation. Um, but it came about because Maggie and I have worked together for many, many years when I was in house, when I was leading a consultancy function of a global education organization. And Maggie was one of our associates, and we did some work together in Wales. And we got to know each other and we got to be quite close and to really appreciate each other. Our values aligned. And she is a mindfulness practitioner and a mindfulness teacher. And it was at another event that we were attending as coaches working together as a team that we just started playing around with the idea of building something together. So wouldn't it be great if we could bring together the worlds of coaching and that all those tools and those powerful processes that we use as coaches and ourselves that we use as coaches to help people to grow their self-awareness with the ability to be present and grounded in the moment so that we can use that self-awareness to then proactively choose how we want to show up. And we thought that was quite a powerful concept that we didn't feel was really out there. It turns out a lot of people are talking about it, but we haven't found any programs that are quite like ours in that way. So we came up with the idea and we sat for hours and hours and hours playing around with different themes, different topics, different tools and modalities, and pulled it together into what was at first a 3-part program. And we piloted it with some really brave pioneers. And they said, actually, it would be better if it was a little bit longer, if we had another month and another session to help to really embed some of the practices. So we did that. We extended it. And yeah, we've done 10 cohorts now. We've got 3 in the making for next year. And we've onboarded a new associate to help us to um, to review and improve the content and also to expand it beyond our current reach. So we started in serving primarily head teachers and leaders in the education sector because that's our background. But now we are expanding to cover or to invite any leader from any sector because it's not about the what of you do, it's about how you do it and leadership and being human in leadership and how really difficult and challenging that is in today's world. So, yeah.
Thanks for that whistle stop tour. It sounds like it was a real coming together of words then, coming together of worlds in many senses of the phrase. It's interesting how you said that inside out. That reminded me of a LinkedIn post you recently did where you described your purpose, which includes helping busy leaders to thrive in work and life by cultivating resilience and presence from the inside out. We had a great chat before the session about how we talk a lot in coaching around design, talking about our defining our purpose, and it's so much easier said than done. And I'm curious as to how you defined your purpose and the journey you went on with coming up with that.
Mm, yeah. I mean, it's a great question because it's something that I was desperate to try and nail when I first started the business. Because that's what people tell you, right? What's your niche and who do you work with and what's your perfect client avatar and how are you going to market and appeal to that characterization? Um, and and also coming from a consultancy background, that's what you do in consultancy, right? You have to be very, very clear about who your clients are and who you want to appeal to and even the down to the language that you use to align with them so that they pick you as a consultant, as an organization to work with. So it felt like that was what I had to do. That's what people expected me to do, and therefore I had to somehow figure this out. And I couldn't. I really, really struggled with it, and I struggled with it because of what most coaches that I speak to struggle with, which is coaching is great for anyone for anything. So, and I like the diversity of working with different leaders in different contexts with different issues. And, one day you might be talking about someone's relationship with their close family or with their sister. And the next you might be talking about challenges of delegating and strategic planning and so on. So I found it almost impossible to put myself in this little straitjacket to be so clear about a niche. Um, so what it took was actually doing it for almost 3 years, and then recently sitting down and going, "Okay, what is it? What is the thread that links everything that I do that makes it unique is a big word, but makes it, mine or makes it a suitable description of how I work and what I do?" So working with busy leaders, I don't know any leader who's not busy. Everybody is flat out trying to do more with less all of the time. Um, and that tends to be quite a theme that comes up. How do I get more done? How do I still have a life? How do I prioritize all of this? It always feels like there's always so much to do and how hard it is to put boundaries in place and to take care of oneself when we're that busy. So those are the people that I work with, busy leaders, to help them thrive in work and life. So the word thrive wasn't an accident either. It's about regardless of the environment that you're in, regardless of the challenges that are thrown at you day in and day out, to step out of the survival mode of firefighting, of just trying to keep afloat from one day to the next, to actually genuinely enjoying the process, enjoying life, enjoying their leadership. Uh, and the two have to go hand in hand, the life and the work, because if one goes down, that will bring the other one down with it. And if one is up, it will bring the other one up. And I came to that because I was looking at my own kind of business plan, and business plan is a big word. It's a drawing on a piece of paper. And I put at the bottom health, relationships with the family, my exercise, my all of the things that nourish and sustain me. And they were at the bottom of the image rather than at the top. And I suddenly looked at this and thought, oh, wow, that's a real shift in my mindset from where I was a few years ago, which was I will do all of this and I will then be able to focus on my relationship, have more time with the kids, be, more healthy, have all of these routines. And actually, no, all of those things were the bedrock. They were the foundation that then enabled me to run the business that I wanted to run. So work and life in balance. And because people are whole and you can't compartmentalize, you can't put them in a box. The things that happen in life affect work and vice versa. So it's important that everything be relevant and on the table for discussion. And then by building resilience and presence from the inside out. So the resilient piece, we use the definition from researcher called Taryn Stejkal, and she did research on what made leaders resilient, or what resilient leaders manifested in terms of behaviors and characteristics. And she defines as the ability to thrive in the context of challenge and complexity, and to not fold. So that's how we see it on the program. And it's about our inner worlds being able to control the controllables, which is our inner world, which is how we view the challenges of the external environment, how we relate to them, what we hold on to, what we let go of, um, how we deal with rumination and anticipatory grief and anticipatory worry of things that are kind of coming down the line. And that all comes from within. It comes from within ourselves. And that's not to minimize the external environmental challenges that are thrown at people, illness, challenges in business, all of those things are real. It's to say that we don't control those things. So therefore, the only work that we can do is the work on the things that we can control, which is ourselves and which is how we relate to the world around us.
Thanks, Astrid. So, if a coach is listening, very much like myself, who is trying to define exactly what their purpose is, and get it into a form that could be shared easily through social media, marketing, or in networking events, just so that they're really clear on what it is they do, who they help, and how they help them. But they're struggling. They've got a few elements and inklings, but they haven't sort of brought it all together yet, and they're feeling a bit frustrated. um, what advice would you give to them on that?
Ah, David, I really wish I could give you a roadmap towards it, but I can't because I didn't find it until I found mine, which was the culmination of having done it for a good long while. So perhaps the only piece of advice that I'm qualified to give is don't worry if you can't find it just yet. It it will come. Focus on the work. Well, this is what worked for me. By doing the work, by naturally building, or by leaning into my strengths and build and naturally finding my way and finding my path, I was then able to retrospectively then go, okay, so what is it that I do and how do I do it? Rather than trying to define it ahead of time and then fit the mold of the thing that you've defined because you think that that's the right thing or that's the thing that you want to do. That's probably terrible advice, but it's all I've got, I'm afraid.
The the irony of asking for a coach for advice isn't lost on me, by the way. It always throws people. It's not really what we do naturally. It's what we're taught not to do.
Yeah, and it feels extremely uncomfortable. It's funny because I'll have a post in draft that I haven't dared to post because it's not quite ready or it just doesn't feel right yet. It actually feels a bit pretentious and corny. That's probably why I haven't posted it. Um, about just that, about how uncomfortable it feels now to give advice to people when you know that yeah, it's not the best way to find your path. But I appreciate that when you're a coach and you're starting out and you're trying to get all of these things right, it's it's hard to perhaps hear a message of doesn't matter. Don't worry too much about getting it right. Serve your clients really well. Focus on that. And for me, supervision, 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 supervision. Um, Even when I was earning very little at the beginning, and the proportion of my income that went on supervision was um was a hard pill to swallow. It really was the making of my style, because it was very easy at that time to fall into the trap of, oh, I need to do it like them, or I need to do it, or the rules tell me that I have to do it this way, or, self judgment and self criticism because I wasn't that coach that is speaking in that way, that is writing in this style, or that I wasn't following perhaps, um, the ICF framework to the T. And actually, supervision is where I was able to unpack a lot of that and find my own way and find my own voice that then led me to, okay, now I'm pretty confident that this is me, this is how I like to work, and this is what I think is really important for my clients.
I'm curious, natural question off the back of that, Astrid, is how can a coach find their first supervisor and the right supervisor for them that's a good fit? And then how can they justify that cost if it is, if they're quite early on in their journey?
Mm, Good question. Again, I was really, really lucky. I found the right supervisor for me off the bat. And I realized, because we have some supervision through the Animas training, don't we? There's what I went through. I know it's changed a lot since then. We had group supervision or peer supervision that was facilitated, and I know that I didn't know what was out there. I didn't know the different styles. I didn't know what would work for me. But having had that experience, when I did go out and find my supervisor, which was potluck, it was LinkedIn, and I I started following this person. I'm happy to share their name if that is allowed. I don't know if maybe not. Because I don't know if she wants me to. Um, and it was exactly right for me, and I knew it because I knew in contrast or in alignment with some of the other experiences that I'd had through training. And that was for me what was really important was what is her both my supervisors. Actually, I have two, well, three, but two of them that I see more regularly. They're both duly qualified as psychotherapists as well as coaches. And that really works for me because it goes to a level of depth that I have found really transformative and helpful for my coaching. So how would someone go about that not without the potluck that I had? Um, I suppose it's probably a bit like coaching. Have a few chemistry calls and shop around, because I know that there are some supervisors that I've spoken to, not in their capacity as supervisors, but just as people. And I've had conversations with them, and in those conversations felt actually this kind of supervision wouldn't work for me, or working with this person wouldn't work for me. And that's not a judgment on them. It's a chemistry and a style question. The bit about the cost and the expense is, what if you don't? What if you don't invest in your own work and you're out there coaching others? There's a very, very big chance, risk, probability that you will be operating from your own place of fear, insecurities, unknown unknowns, the bottom of the iceberg kind of stuff. And that will play out on clients, it'll play out in space, it'll play out on you as a coach. Um, So if you're coaching, for me, you need to be in supervision, whatever that looks like, in some form or another. And there may be um, areas or arenas where you can do that at lower cost, maybe. But for me, even if sort of 50% of your income is going on that at the time, I think it's it's worth it. Um, yeah. But it's an ideological perspective position that I have, and maybe not everybody shares that.
Thanks, Astrid. Thanks for sharing. And we can only share from our own experiences as well. Can't tell people what to do, but we can tell them what worked for us. Um, I was wondering if I could jump back a little bit to your purpose again. As you were describing it, it really took me back to the story that you told everyone in the leadership course about your experiences as a leader during the pandemic. And from your experiences as a leader in crisis, I wondered if you could share a little bit about that with us and your experience there and how that drives you to coaching leaders, because I'm a great believer in that we're best placed to help the person that we used to be. And I know that you spoke very openly in on the course about that, and it really stuck with me, had a profound impact on me, um, having from the perspective of someone who's clearly very driven to support people to not be in that position again.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that was such a difficult time, wasn't it, for so many people. And yeah, so I mean, maybe listeners are interested in what that story is. So we can do a quick whistle stop tour, and then I can link it to the work that I do now. So during COVID, I was leading a consultancy team in a global education organization. So we were almost the not the front line, that's the wrong word, because the front line were the teachers and the people out there, trying to educate children despite the context they were operating in. But we were an advisory research body, and many of our clients all over the world were looking to us for answers. What do we do? What do we do with these schools how do how do we keep children safe who are not at school? How do we educate in the community? With how do we educate from a distance in contexts where there might be very, very low access to tech? And even in the UK, we have access to tech, but we still struggle to get everybody online and working in a certain way. And so we had sort of a surge of interest in working with us, and we had to make some really tricky decisions about who we were able to work with and what kind of projects we felt we could take on. And at the same time, we needed to put some people on furlough because we knew that the wider organization was in financial trouble. So the more people we had on furlough, the more likely we were to survive this period. So we had surge of work to do, very uncertain and uncharted territory. So not our sort of bread and butter that we were able to lean on all the stuff that we had done in the past and somehow learn and repackage and support. We had to go and find it out, and then this pressure to have a lean team. Um, and then those big decisions about where people should be, where they should go, should they travel to some of these countries and areas and getting caught on the way back or on the way out with quarantine and hotels and all sorts of things. And so I did what I do best in a crisis, which is double down on doing, controlling. Not enough hours in the day, that's fine. I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'll do 3 hours of work before the kids wake up. And then I'll take over for the kids in the morning, and then I'll hand over to my husband and I'll go back to work. And then I'll go to bed at, you know, 7:30 so that I can do it all again the next day. And um and it was just relentless. So I burnt out, as you can imagine. It was a really, really difficult time emotionally. We had my mom living with us for the second or third of lockdowns, I can't remember. which again, is helpful, but then there's another person in your roof, and, family relationships are tricky sometimes. Um, and yeah, it was really hard. And I did have a coach for a good part of that period, actually. And I think that's what sort of kept me kept me going and kept me alive despite the challenges. But I still didn't quite get to a place where I was able to really put in place some healthy boundaries to really care for myself. That pull of doing the right thing by others, and the idea of the people that we were serving ultimately were um some of the most deprived and children in need in the world. So the pull to do and to prioritize the work and the people was really, really strong. So I guess what I learned was that that's all well and good, but you can't do any of that unless you are yourself full, or full, or at least half full and not completely empty. And you can't pour onto others. And I really did learn that lesson the hard way, that I was perhaps not showing up the way I wanted to show up. I had perhaps had less patience. Definitely had less patience at home because everything was being contained at work, and then um, yeah, spilling over into personal life. So so from that, what I learned was that the importance of the self, of the human first. And I also learned later on through supervision. I didn't quite get there in my leadership coaching, but I got there later on. Um, this realization that what was driving was deep in my iceberg. If you think about our coach training, was the belief system, was how I felt about my sense of self and my sense of self-worth and where I derived that from. And the very idea of not doing more, of prioritizing myself, was in intention with where I derived my sense of self. So it, it really showed me the importance of unpacking the subconscious as much as is possible in a coaching space. We're not therapists, and we're not psychoanalysts, and we're not going to stick with people for 10 or 20 years to help them unpack everything that's sitting there. But we can get to a level of depth in transformative coaching that helps people to rewrite the script that is sitting underneath everything. But then that what we're doing is making the unconscious conscious. We're bringing all of that stuff to the surface, so that then, hopefully, with a bit of practice and presence, that's where the second part of the inside out is so important. We can make those day-to-day changes in behavior that make all the difference.
Wow. Thank you, Astrid. I was moved the first time and I was moved again by that story. And I think what really gets me, I love that you cannot pour from an empty cup analogy that you said there. It reminds me of that, we have to put our own oxygen mask on first, because what good are we to anyone else if we don't help ourselves first? And also that, we are not our achievements. High achievements does not necessarily mean, it might mean high success, but if we don't achieve anything one month, it doesn't mean that anything negative about us. But I think we perceive it that way. Um, but what amazes me is that, I'm sure anyone listening, and I wouldn't have blamed you after that experience for running a mile from leadership and said, right, I want nothing to do with leadership and leaders ever again. But you've doubled down again. You've made it your literal purpose to help other leaders not get in that situation and kind of catch it before it becomes too late or damaging. And I just find that so inspiring, because we could become the victim of our experiences. But I heard somewhere that the very thing that you think disqualifies you from helping people is actually what qualifies you to help people.
Mhm. That's an interesting thought. And I wonder if, because actually I do feel like um, I have moved away from leadership in such as in that I am not a leader, but because and the nature of the work that I do day to day is very, very different, isn't it? Although running your own business does not come without its challenges. The nature of the conversations that you're having is very, very different. Um, I think for me, it's actually the thread between what happened to me then and what I'm doing now is perhaps not even necessarily the leadership thing. It's about the human journey of getting to know yourself on a much deeper level and how that affects everything and how that can manifest itself in your behaviors with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family. Um, and that's why I like to do the deeper work. And that's why I think leaders need the deeper work more than anything. And that's also why the journey of my being on the other side of the table at Animas and being part of delivering content for our community was the idea that actually executive coaching, you don't need to have been a leader to be an executive coach. From my perspective. From my perspective, what is most important about being an executive leader is that you work at depth, that you are able to help the human get to the bottom of the human barriers that are holding them back from thriving in their work and in their life. Because challenging or an inability to delegate quite often has nothing to do with delegating, right? It has to do with where the leader derives their sense of value and how their relationship with control, what is important to them about how things get done and where all of that comes from is. And so if they come to you with a challenge around delegation and you stay on the surface of, okay, so what do you want to do? If you grow model coaching, you're not going to affect long-term sustainable change. So you can have leaders who have rebranded themselves as coaches who now coach on a relatively superficial level, or you can have some transformative coaches who work at depth. Often they are dual qualified, um, who have never been leaders, but who work with leaders and help them to go deep into what's going on for them. And I know which one I would choose.
Mm. Yeah. I wondered, Astrid, if I could slightly pivot the conversation to your experiences with Animas, as I know you trained with Animas not that long ago, and within a relatively short amount of time, sort of 3 to 4 years, you've then become a speaker on one of our specialist programs. And I'm wondering what initially led you to Animas, and what were your experiences like of being a trainee, and then also being a trainer in a sense, being a speaker.
Mm, yeah. So again, I feel like all of this happened very instinctively and naturally. I got some advice on various. So I'll go through the kind of chronology of it in the order that you shared. Um, on training providers out there, and I came to the taster session, the taster event. It wasn't a session as such, but more of a talk. And I did that with Henley, and I did it with a couple of other providers too. And what really drew me to Animas was the transformative element. But at that time, I didn't really know what it was. It was just a felt sense. It was a kind of a more of an instinct. Um, and so I went with it without doing too much additional research. It just felt right. And uh, ever since I left leadership, that tends to be my my way. My MO is more felt sense, intuition. What do I feel is right, rather than a very clinical, you know, approach to things. So I trained with Animas, and it was just brilliant. From the first weekend, I was training as um, I was still in house full time. And actually, at first, it wasn't about becoming a coach and starting my own business. It was about improving my coaching skills so that I could better lead my team and better support my team. So I wanted to, it was something that I felt naturally, I felt quite confident with and quite good at. And I wanted to develop it deeper, a deeper practice. But then when I started the training, I realized actually, no, this is brilliant. And this is what I want to do. Um, Again, still wanted to embed it into my existing work. So I wanted coaching to become a greater part of the services that we offered. I wanted it to be a more integrated aspect of our consultancy, um and so on. So we did do some of that to a certain extent, but it wasn't enough. So then I decided to leave and set up my own business. And a couple of years. So I stayed in touch with my one of the trainers that we had for three of the modules with Nick Falk, legend. I love Nick. He's brilliant. Um, and we have since worked together on another program with executive leaders in education and stayed in touch. And yeah, and then he introduced me to Ruth. Ruth and I had a couple of conversations, shared a bit about what I'm doing and the topics that I'm interested in, shared about Inside Out. She invited me to do a lecture, one of the free lectures in January this year. Wow, yes. And that was on busting the myths around executive leadership and what it takes to coach leaders. Um, and because it was meant to be provocative, I took one end of the extreme of that argument, and I do recognize the value. And having been a leader, I suppose I wanted to make a point about what it was that I felt that leaders needed most um, from their coaches. And that went down really, really well. I think over 450 people came to that session. And I think Animas got some great feedback, and they enjoyed it and they enjoyed my style. And so then they invited me to participate in the Coaching Leaders in Times of Crisis program. And I was given a lot of, so I proposed a few ideas. I was invited to deliver on resilience for the coach and resilience for the clients, which will bring us back to that conversation we were having earlier about doing our own work as coaches and how important it is for us to be working on ourselves, taking care of ourselves whilst we're serving our clients. Um, and then unfortunately another colleague was unable to deliver their session, so they invited me to sub on the self-awareness topic. And all three topics really beautifully came together because I wanted to talk about self-awareness anyway in the context of resilience. And that just gave me the luxury of having a whole session on that before jumping into the resilience topic. So yeah, that one, by the way, that experience really required a lot of inner inner work. Because I was invited as pretty much an unknown entity, um, not tried and tested, haven't written books, haven't, you know, had 20 years of coaching and or a PhD in coaching and whatnot. Um, Whereas, as you know, the lineup for that program was really impressive. We had all of the big names in coaching on that program. Um, so for me to be able to deliver felt like a real privilege, and it was so joyful. Really enjoyed it working with Bronwyn. She's amazing. I would love to spend more time with her. It did take a lot of inner work on my own imposter thoughts, my sense of self, and why am I here? Am I here just because I've been good at maintaining relationships with people, or am I actually quite good at this? And people are recognizing that I'm quite good at this, and I've got stuff to say that people want to hear. Uh, so yeah, a incredible experience. steep learning curve, and the feedback was it just blew my mind, and it was so humbling just to hear from. I've had individuals come to me through LinkedIn, and I've heard from Ruth and yourself that people really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was good. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Astrid. It's so reassuring for wannabe future facilitators like myself to hear that you assume when you listen to a confident speaker that delivers a session, and also a very engaging session with loads of audience participation and exercises. And I think you had us doing some mindfulness and some deep breathing, and someone who delivers that session so well and sort of confidently, it's easy to believe that every speaker just has it all together, and that how on earth could I ever reach that level, or be so confident and calm as a facilitator. It's so interesting and reassuring to know that there's actually a lot more going on, and you had to work through a lot before the session, and no doubt during the session as well, in order to show up and be so present and deliver such a powerful session for us.
yeah, I like to believe we've all got a little bit of that, and I've learned to embrace it, particularly through that process, actually, because it's there for a reason. It helps. It's trying to tell me something. If as long as I'm willing to listen, and perhaps there's some of the things that it's saying that I want to rewrite, but some of it perhaps is going to help me to do a really good job, because I'm going to want to serve these people. I'm going to want to make it a great use of their time. I don't want to show up and let them down. So there's a positive. All of these things is the striving, um the imposter thoughts, they're there for a reason, and they've served me really well. They served me really well in my leadership, and they still serve me. But I need to keep them in check and just make sure that I'm not tipping into the shadow where they don't serve me quite so well. So yeah, I wouldn't want. There's going to be lots of negatives in this sentence. I wouldn't want to not feel the butterflies. I think they're good. And the day I stop feeling the butterflies is the day I need to do something else, or I need to stretch myself further, or I need to reconsider, because inevitably I'm not going to be giving all of myself to what I'm doing. And that's when I think my practice suffers. So similar with Inside Out, we've done 10 cohorts. I still, on the face-to-face day, and the first session, I still show up with a bit of butterflies. What's this going to be like? Are people going to like it? Am I going to forget things? But I'm learning to love it now.
I can second that, Astrid. I relate. I used to get exam nerves, and I still do get exam nerves. Like, particularly when you're in a waiting room, which used to be a physical thing, is now very much a virtual thing. Before you go in, and you have, say, 2 hours, but I've learned to sort of, those nerves actually really serve me, because they help someone who's super distractible to actually focus and think, oh, right, okay, need to just pay attention now. And after the session, I'm normally completely exhausted after 2 hours of intense focus, but I tend to get good results for myself that I'm really proud of, because those nerves have served me kind of get me on the wave and hold me on the wave so I can ride it through to when it breaks. So, shout out to that. And just very briefly, I noticed when you were talking about the Inside Out program, and also about facilitating your 3 sessions for Animas, that I think the word you used, you'd piloted the session first. You sort of tested out the waters, and then gathered feedback, refined it, and then delivered it. And I was just curious as to if that's a process that you apply to all of your facilitation, in the way that you provide, in the way that you apply supervision to your coaching.
Mm, great question. So yes, I did run the first session by a colleague, actually, in a kind of supervision type format, but he was doing me a favor. So Paul Golding, if you're listening to this, thank you. He made such a big difference, and what a beautiful soul that man is. And interestingly, I've only met him recently. We've had quite a few now online calls, and We've met a couple of times in person. Um, but to the point that you're, I think, no, it's not the point that you're trying to make, but it's another point. Um, your network is going to be is so important, isn't it? And when you're not in an organization and you're trying to run your own business, you have to go and find it, and you have to go and build it and create it and sustain it. And for me, that has been absolutely essential in my journey. And having Paul, I mean, there were a handful of people that I could have contacted at that time, but knowing that I could just write to Paul and ask him, have you got an hour? Can I, take you through this content, and can you poke holes in it, kick the tires in it, and help me to be ready? And he did. So for anybody wanting to do the facilitation thing, being out there, showcasing their work, or even, yeah, or even just building a business on your own, even if you're not into the visibility thing, um, building your network and nurturing and sustaining your network is so important for mental health, for business, for your well-being.
Thanks. That's really a great shout out to if it's not what you know, it's who you know very often, and the importance of the people you surround yourself with. Um, so as we start to close up, I'd love to ask you if there's what's on your plans for the future? What's on the cards for you and Astrid Korin coaching? And yeah,
Thank you. So, I am going to continue with one-to-one coaching and exec team coaching because I love it. Um, on that front, I'm going. Well, the aim is to expand a little bit in terms of the sectors that I serve. But I'm going to do that progressively and organically. It's already starting to happen, that kind of trickle effect. Uh, so I will have a smaller proportion of my portfolio in education, but I do still want to maintain that because I just love working with leaders in education. I think that they're so important for our society, and they deserve all the support that we can give them. And it's very lonely at the top of education organizations. But I also want a bigger portfolio, a wider, more diverse portfolio of leaders in different contexts and different organizations. But the big thing on the horizon is the scale up of Inside Out. So we are thinking about our next moves. We would like to turn it into more of a network and a community, so that the Inside Out, the program as such, becomes more of an induction into a community of leaders who can all support each other and access additional workshops, practices, catch-up sessions, alumni events, and so on, to keep the practice alive. Because what we know in leadership is that it gets super busy. And even with the best of intentions, sometimes those little habits that sustain us, that we introduce to people on the program, that people love and that they that work really well for them whilst they're with us, we don't know then, how sustainable it is in the long term. So we have got data, we've got impact data, and we know that it's working. What we don't know is how long into the future does it work. Uh, so we want to be able to harness what people have learned and keep and support them to keep the practice going, so that even in times of high stress and busyness, they have access to um, some more support and a reminder for the little habits that make a huge difference. And a lot of the work or a lot of the practices from the field of mindfulness are about regulating the nervous system, regulating the body, in order to be able to show up with authenticity in the way that they want in their leadership and in their lives. So it's all connected. It's all back to purpose. Um, and we want to scale that. So next year we have a cross-organizational cohort that starts in January, and we have 3 in-house cohorts that are in the making. Um, and we just like to do more with more leaders, and we'll probably be onboarding a couple of new associates. Um, So watch this space. We're not quite sure exactly what it looks like, but we're starting to create the vision and take some small steps towards that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Astrid. And if anyone's listening, they want to get in touch, find out more, where can they go to find you and contact you?
Yes. So by all means, contact me on LinkedIn or on the website. It's astridkorin.com. Is it astridkorin.com? Let me just check that. Yes,
It
it
was
is.
the last time I checked.
Yeah, and you can find it under training programs inside out. Or just, I mean, LinkedIn's probably the best and easiest way to get in touch. Yeah. Would love to hear.
Well, thank you so much, Astrid. All there is left to say from me is just thank you so much for coming on today. And if anyone is listening, if anyone has the opportunity to speak with Corinne or um, see her speak or go on one of her facilitated sessions, the value that she adds is unbelievable. The way you tell stories just reaches out and grabs you. So I would implore anyone listening to sign up and grasp that opportunity with both hands.
Lovely. Thanks, David. Thanks for inviting me and thanks for your wonderful, lovely comments. And for this opportunity to have a chat. I really enjoyed it.